Shungite is a black mineroid found mainly in Russia. It's primarily composed of carbon, about 98% or so, and it easily rubs off in your hands, particularly the raw stones. It can also have veins of pyrite and quartz, which I think really adds to the unique look of it, both raw and polished. Shungite has a most hardness of about 3.5 to 4, so it's really not a material best suited for beginners. Some people like to skip the 60-90 stage, or stage 1, when rock tumbling something this soft, but I find I still prefer to smooth them using 60-90 grit. My method then is just to check it more frequently, so I might pop the barrel open and quick check about once a day or once every other day, and also to use slightly less grit. That's mainly because the grit will just be wasted if you don't run the barrel for a full 7 days. So every couple days, I dump it and give the stones a quick check over.
A lot of unused grit.
Here, I'm tumbling it with fluorite, which is another softer stone that needs to be checked frequently. I'm going to put all of the shungite back in because while some pieces are close, they're still not quite ready. A few days later, and I checked it again. I tried to use gloves here to try to stop the shungite from staining my hands, but I found them clunky and difficult to work with.
This fluorite, this shungite needs to go back in, and this shungite looks ready. I took off my gloves to do the sorting, and this is still what they look like. Washed off a bit better though.
Once everything is shaped to my liking, I move them to the vibratory tumbler bowl where I'll finish the process of polishing them. Here I'm using a 5-pound bowl, even though I don't particularly like the shape of this bowl and how things tumble in it. I didn't have a ton of the shungite, so this is the bowl I went with initially. For a softer stone protocol, I did use a lot of ceramic media to cushion the stones. I added 3 tablespoons of 220 grit. Here it looks like the stones are moving relatively well in this bowl, but you'll see when I go to dump it here after doing a day in 220 grit that actually everything on the bottom was just sort of stuck and compacted and not moving and sliding around the way it really should be.
Decided to move it over into my 10-pound bowl. Let's add what I have left of media. There we go. All right. And I hope that's going to be enough to keep this moving. Check first just to see if it moved. All right, I think that'll work. So I'm going to add grit and sugar. So I added sugar and some 500 grit. I did about 3 tablespoons of 500 grit and just dumped in about an equal amount of sugar. I usually don't do sugar at this stage, but this is, shungite's a hardness of 3.5, 4 or so, so I'm going to do sugar even in the 500 grit.
I let this go in 500 for about a day. Everything dumped out of the 10-pound bowl easily, so it was a good move to move it from that 5-pound bowl to this bowl. With softer stones, I usually do 1,000 grit, so I added 2 tablespoons of 1,000 grit and some granulated sugar. I let that run in 1,000 grit for about a day before I rinsed the stones out. Polish for softer stones is usually done in dry media, so you need to remove the stones from the ceramic media and dry everything off completely. I wanted to try using something other than the dry corncob media though to see if it would work, so I'm using plastic pellets to see if you can get a similar effect using those. I generally don't care for using plastic pellets or any sort of plastic media, but I want to give this a try to see if you could get similar results using plastic media versus the dry polish for the last stage.
That's what it's looking like after 1,000.
I did about 2.5 tablespoons of polish.
and about an equal amount of sugar. I am not sure if this is going to be enough pellets, plastic pellets, to cause really good movement. I'm going to test it and see, and then I'll add more of my plastic media if I need to. There they go. I hate plastic media. I find it really difficult to work with. It's just like falling out of the bowl. I'm going to get the cap on it.
I let this go in the plastic media for a little over a day and a half before I rinsed it out. The results weren't terrible, especially for a softer stone like Shungite. I wasn't super impressed with what I saw, so after I dried everything off and looked it over, I decided to try to run these in dry polish for a day to see if I got any improvement on the amount of shine. Here I'm filling my 10-pound bowl with my corncob media. I previously used this for the polish step, so there is some polishing powder still left in there. I like to layer everything for some reason, even though it doesn't really make much sense to take time to do that since it's all going to mix in once you start the tumbler anyway. Even though this already had some polished media in it, I did decide to add more since I'm using more corncob media than I typically have in the past, and also I'm not really sure how much of the powder is still good. After about a day in the dry polish, I pulled one out to look at. I gave it a quick rinse and dry, and I do think there was some slight improvement using the dry polish compared to the plastic pellet polish, and would recommend using the dry polish in the future. I'm going to take them all out and rinse them off. While I show off some of my favorite pieces from this Shungite batch, I'll talk a little bit about tumbling it. First, it's really not a beginner stone due to its Mohs hardness being 3.5 to 4. But I do think if you've tumbled a few things already, that this is something that can be tackled by somebody who has a little bit of tumbling experience under their belt. I'm sure the quality of your tumbling rough will also greatly contribute to the results you get. I can't remember where I got this tumbling rough from, and I never compared it from 2 different sources, but I would imagine better quality rough is going to give you better results. I also think it's really important that you use a lot of media to cushion it because there are these pyrite and quartz veins, and that will scratch up the Shungite that's in there if you don't have enough cushioning in between all of the stones. Last, I think you could get pretty decent results using plastic media for the last step. But if you can use a dry polish, you are going to get better results going right from 1000 grit to a dry polish. I also want to note just again how it is pretty messy to tumble this. It often stains your fingernails, gets under your fingernails, can stain your hands if you don't wash really thoroughly. So I do recommend trying to use gloves if it works for you.